Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Earwax. I'm Colin, and today we're doing a review of the brand new album by Bartees, Strange Horror. Alright guys, so this is the third full-length album from singer, songwriter, rapper, multi-instrumentalist Bartees Strange. And he is someone that I've never gotten super into in the past. Not because I haven't enjoyed his stuff, but just because I've never gotten the huge urge to dive into one of his albums. I've enjoyed a couple of the songs that I've heard on the radios here and there, particularly Boomer, which I think was like the first major single that got some radio play on like my local radio stations. He's got a bit of an interesting story. So I know like one of the first things that he really did was an EP covering The National with his own kind of like unique spin and take on it. And I listened to that a little bit and I did enjoy it. But again, nothing like really drew me in to giving one of his albums a fair shot. So when I saw this album was coming up a couple months ago, I kept getting ads for it. I was like, you know what? I think this is now a good time to fully dive in and give one of his albums a proper listen. And oh boy, am I glad that I did. This is one of the most interesting albums I've listened to in a long time. It's so unique. It's a little weird. There's some moments that I don't like absolutely love, but overall it's a really cool experience. So without further ado, let's get into the track list. So the album opens up with the song Too Much, which starts off as this really kind of groovy sort of indie rock track. Before about halfway through, kind of kicking into a more rap-centric approach, at least as far as like the vocals go. I will be honest here, I don't love the rapping. The vocals up to this point are kind of like, have a little bit of a Gorillaz vibe to them, where they're kind of being sung through like a bullhorn, and I really dig that. The rapping here is just not great. But it's not terrible. It feels like it's a weird sort of direction for the song to go. But then like towards the end, it gets back into the singing again, and it's still a pretty fun song and like a cool way to open. I'm just not super in love with the rapping here. But then we get into the next song, which is Hit It, Quit It, which is basically all rap as far as like the vocals, but I do really like them. They're a little bit harder, a little bit more driving. The beat has a very like funk and psychedelic sort of feel. He does call out like Bootsy Collins, I believe, at one point in the lyrics. So I think there's a lot of like influence and feel from this as far as like the Parliament Funkadelic, maybe even like some Sly influences here. But yeah, it's a really cool track and one that I thoroughly enjoy. After that is Sober, which I think is the first and maybe only single I had heard off this album leading up to the release. And this has got a pretty drastic shift in vibe and tone from the song before it. It's a lot more chill, laid back, starts off with like some acoustic guitar work. The vocals a bit more restrained. It's good though. I do like it. It's definitely something that's easy to like sit back and sort of vibe to. The drums are simple, but they're really good. I don't think drums have to be super intricate or like super difficult to be really good. And I appreciate some like quality and just solid simplistic percussion. And there's even some background like guitar solo work like towards the end, which I do really enjoy as well. After that, we get into Baltimore, which is borderline like a country song, and it works super well. So it's a little bit on the more like somber, kind of slow country ballad side, but with still some like kind of classic R&B and pop vocal arrangements on top of it. It's got some really cool guitar tones too that give it a bit of like a rugged sort of like trail feel. But then like it does amp up a little bit towards the end, gets like almost a little bit garage rocky with the climax, and like the guitar gets a little fuzzy and like sort of lo-fi in a couple points, and I really enjoy it. But then it does end off like back into that chill sort of like somber country tone. And this song does a really good job of exemplifying like one of the things I absolutely love about this album is how easily he's able to just like go in and out of different genres and make them blend so well together. It's one of the reasons I'm such a big fan of like Gorillaz and other bands like that, is when you can just effortlessly mash genres together and not make it sound like forced or weird. And he does it so well on this album, which then goes into Lie 95, which is a fairly like restrained, toned down song, like very minimal instrumentation here. The vocals are kind of driving this forward. The tone and the feel and like the rhythm of the song is a little bit more uplifting than the previous song, but still very like heavy subject matter that he's singing about. And you can tell that it's definitely coming from a place of, like strong emotions. Once the drums do kind of kick in here, it really drives the whole song forward. And there's like some light guitar work and synths in the background as well. But for the most part, it's pretty restrained instrumentally. But I like that a lot, especially coming out of the very like somber sort of like country vibes of the previous song. Then after that, it gets into Wants Needs, which is the longest song on the album and definitely one of the weirdest when it comes to like genre shifts. So it starts off like this borderline like garage rock intro, sort of like, more again fuzzy kind of crunchy guitars. The vocals are a little bit more pounding, a little bit more pulsing. I even get like some borderline melodic punk vibes at a couple points, but without ever leaning too hard like into that aesthetic fully. And then about halfway through, it breaks down into like a lo-fi hip hop beat, with some really interesting just instrumentation, some sampling as well. And that goes on for a bit, and then it kind of gets back into the groovy sort of like indie rock, garage rock vibe. And again, another just like amazing example of how like easily he's just switching in and out of these different genres. I do want to mention too at this point that this album was co-produced by Jack Antonoff, and generally I'm not like the biggest fan of albums or stuff that he touches. You can hear his influence like everywhere, and I think it's overdone and it's overplayed. But on this album in particular, I don't get that, and so I don't know like what what they did together to like to come up with this, but this is probably like one of my favorite albums that he's ever produced. Then we get into Lovers, and Lovers is hands down probably my favorite song on the album. I don't know why I love it so much when artists just randomly throw in like an electro song or electro pop song on an album that is not at all like going that direction. But it is so good. Like it works so well. It's the super dark, brooding, almost like goth electro pop song. You get strong like Sylvan Esso vibes and strong like sort of dark wave vibes at certain points, but it's like pulsing, it's driving. The vocals, the vocal filters that he's using here are super, super cool. And yeah, I absolutely love this song. Immediate top of my playlist for the year. And yeah, absolutely going to be playing this one on repeat heavily. It's such a cool, laid back, again, sort of like just dark electronic song. And it's like probably my favorite type of electronic music is this sort of, not like lo-fi, but it's restrained, almost like minimalist electronic music. And I have to draw comparisons to Sylvan Esso, and I think like they're the best at this type of electro pop. And it's just, he does it super, super well here. From there, we get into Doomsday Buttercup, which is a fantastic song name. This also kind of has like a borderline electronic-y dance feel to it, but without using like as much synthesizers. It's still, I feel like, more just drums and guitars with like a little bit of maybe synth and bass thrown in, but it's very, very restrained. It's some really light percussion. The guitar is super faint as well. The vocals, again, are kind of driving this song forward. But it's really groovy in a sort of like restrained kind of way, which I really enjoy. It's a nice like ease out of the slightly more like dance vibes of Lovers. This whole song definitely has some like just straight up lo-fi vibes as well. And then towards the end, the instrumentation does get a little bit chaotic, and there's like some horns and some like brass and stuff thrown in, and like some random samples. And even on like my third listen, I was like pulling new sounds out of this song that I had not heard previously. And then from there, we get into 17, which is probably like from a lyrical standpoint, one of the most just like heartbreaking and like personal songs on the album. I'm not going to get into the actual lyrical content, like you'll listen to it and hear it, but yeah, I definitely felt this one on each listen. It's got some like kind of borderline singer-songwriter sort of guitar work in the beginning, the vocals, a little pop, little R&B, little rock. I mean, that's kind of what he's been doing throughout the entire album. There's like some light string arrangements at certain parts, some very, very light backing, like sort of choir vocals. And yeah, it's a cool little chill track until it's not. And then like when it does hit and like kicks into gear, it's such a drastic tonal shift from the first part of the song that it's a little jarring at first, but like by my third listen, I really enjoyed it. It was like, you know, it's almost lulling me into like a false sense of security and then like hitting you with reality. And I think it was done super, super well. And then from there, we get into the last 3 songs on the album, starting with Loop Defenders. And Loop Defenders is wild. So it starts with like this really jazzy sort of like lo-fi hip hop beat, with some, again, like the kind of signature pop, R&B, rock vocals going over it. But then like when the rap hits, like the rap verse hits, I think it's the strongest rap verse on the album. Not that there's a ton of rapping on the album, but like I think this verse is the best example of it. And then it again gets back into an almost like garage rock sort of like fuzz crunchy sort of ending, and it's almost like 3 distinct styles throughout the song, but it works cohesively super, super well. From there, we get into North Gun, which is another one of my just absolute favorite songs. It's this fast-paced, driven, sort of like rock, hip-hop, you know, reminds me of something you might find off like Seeing Sounds. I absolutely love this just like complete disregard for genre standards and just kind of moving forward with whatever the hell he wants to do. There's like some psych rock guitar in the background, some like indie rock. There's some just like, it's the beat itself is a little all over the place, but again, it works super, super well. And then we get into the last song of the album, which is Backseat Bantin'. So this is the first and probably the only song on the album that I can actually kind of hear the Jack Antonoff influence in. And I don't mind it here. I think it's because the entire album is so different and so varied that when you get into something that does sound a little bit familiar, it kind of brings the whole experience back down to earth. And yeah, it's a cool jammy vibe. I mean, you get that sort of like Springsteen influence sound that Jack Antonoff has kind of become known for, but it also still very wholly feels like a Bartees Strange song. And that's what I love about this entire album, is that like not a single one of these songs doesn't feel like it fits well with what I've come to know and expect from Bartees Strange, even as like a fairly casual listener up until this point. So I'm super excited to go back and listen to his other 2 albums in more in depth. I'm definitely going to be playing this album a lot more moving forward. I think it's one of the coolest listening experiences that I've had in a long time. If you like albums that kind of push boundaries without being too aggressive in like one direction or the other, I think this is a great one to put on your list. I don't think there's going to be many people out there that can speak really anything too negatively about this album, because it really does scratch a lot of itches that I think a lot of modern music appreciators have. And yeah, it's an absolutely like super fun album. So I'm feeling a minus on this one. Again, I think there's a couple moments here and there that like aren't necessarily my favorite. I think there's maybe a couple moments that do play it a little safe, but overall it's super, super solid. Great listen. Go check it out. So that's going to be it for me, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, ring that bell for notifications, comment down below if you've listened to this album yet. If you haven't, go check it out. And as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.